the Zoom. And I'm really, really happy to, in just a moment, turn it over to Franklin Hysten. As many of you know, the collaborative has been on a path forward to become an anti-racist collaborative for about 2 years now. And so we have brought a number of trainings and resources to you all in our resource sharing meetings. And I'm really happy to announce that we're kicking off a three-part series with Franklin. Franklin is the founder of Blaze Consulting and has been a dear friend and ally of the collaborative for several years now. Many of us have gotten to know him through our work through On the Verge, and he is just a wealth of knowledge and very intuitive and inspiring and insightful and a dear friend. So thank you for being here with us today. So a couple of logistics. The meeting is available in Spanish on the Zoom. So for folks who would like to listen to the meeting in Spanish, if you're joining in virtually, please click the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen to hear the meeting in Spanish. And then you will have an opportunity to also see the slides in Spanish. And Christina will drop those directions into the chat box. And I think that those are all of our logistics. In the vein of transparency, this is our first hybrid meeting that we've done, and so thank you to, I don't know if it's Rory back there or Dan, but thank you. Thanks, Rory, for helping us do this. So we're giving it a try as we move back into this hybrid world. The meeting is being recorded. And are there any other logistics I'm forgetting?
There's a sign-up sheet
going
around. If you could keep it circulating and write your name and your email. There's also demographic forms on your table. If you haven't filled that out yet this year, please fill it out. I will drop the link in the chat for those of you joining us on Zoom.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Franklin, and thank you again for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to the people online. Can you hear me fine? Can you put them on the screen?
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best to try to make this interactive both ways. So I'm going to give my best effort at it. It feels a little bit like I'm on a talk show during a pandemic. My name is Franklin, and Allison, I have to say thank you so very much for having me here. Ever so often in this work that we're discussing today, you meet allies, and then you meet co-conspirators, people who actually will use their privilege to move in the direction of equity and inclusion and put something on the line. And Allison has demonstrated her commitment to DEI and also just to being humanity together. I appreciate you for welcoming our work and me into your beautiful community that I got to drive into and see this beautiful winter wonderland after traveling from the Bay Area, from the East Bay. Here we are. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me fine? Okay, great. So this is interactive, so I'm not going to perform per se, but I want to invite people to be on camera. We're going to invite you several times to speak with one another, and so it's helpful to not be in observer mode or be observed, but to actually be interactive. So I'm going to keep speaking to you. As a matter of fact, let me hear and have you put into the chat, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Or if you did not have breakfast, then you can say, I'm on intermittent fasting, 16-8, 24. Oh man, I don't know what y'all doing in January, February. And for those in the room, why don't you introduce yourself to your table mates? Here's how you're going to do it. Would you please find one thing everyone at your table has in common? And let's not do, we're from Truckee, we like food. Try to find something interesting. All right, go ahead and introduce yourself. All right, let's talk to my friends in this back corner. What's one thing you all have in common?
We all travel to Mexico.
All right, let's go. We've all been to Mexico. How about this table group here?
Well, we all have an association with Sierra Community House. They are all, we work for them, and then they, she's on the board, she's our super fan.
And we all have apparel from them.
Yes.
Nice. Nice. Swag from Sierra Community House is the thing to get. Okay. All right, how about this group?
All of us here have in common that we are skiers. In fact, even to the point of teaching skiing to varying degrees, all the way from teaching family members to being currently professional ski instructors.
Ski instructors, let's go.
We like Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd. And
We also said we've all been to Mexico.
that's great. That's great. Is there anybody on camera on Zoom that wants to share what they had for breakfast? Come on, I have ringers in that room. Go ahead, Christina. Okay, Christina, we can't hear you, but we're going to make that adjustment and come right back. All right, here we go. Let's talk about our opportunity for today. Our opportunity for today is to look at examining our bias and being able to think about what's possible when we explore our bias, and one tool that we might use to interrupt bias. So we'll be doing that today. We're going to be together until noon. Let's go to the overview slide. So many organizations and nonprofits have been intensifying their efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice. And they make plans about it. You might have wrote your DEI statement and put it on your website. You've started to train the staff. We've engaged in readings and YouTube videos. And then comes the execution piece. And that's where things start to stall a little bit, because we're starting to do the work of shifting our organizational culture and starting to think about how do we share power and start to think about how do we see things operate differently in our day-to-day. And so we start to slow down. So our organization, Blaze Consulting, and our partnership with On the Verge, we start to think about how do we move people into action, and not just, I want to think more about this. So that's part of our opportunity for today. And then we'll be in a 3-part series that will look at some of the more challenging or some of the challenges that come up when we start to go in after implementation. And those might include, let's see if we put there, how do we name the systems in our organizations, the practices in our organizations that serve to sustain the status quo, that mirror white supremacy culture, and start to articulate what those systems are, what those practices are, what those cultural elements are. How does one walk, we explored this in On the Verge last season, how does one walk the fine line of being an ally, even a co-conspirator, without being a savior, right? And that is a fine line. That many times in our effort to not want to be a white savior, then we completely are drastically back up in our allyship. So how do we start to lean into that conversation? And how do we honor the myriad roles that can be taken so that there's not just one role you can take and one way that anti-racism or anti-oppression can look, but there's multiple roles and ways. Some people are storytellers, some people are healers, some people go and provide food and make sure everybody's well nourished. So it's not everybody has to get in the street and block a freeway, although that's what my wife likes to do. And so, there's different ways, and we're going to explore that as well, because sometimes we bring judgment if it doesn't look the way we want it or how we would prefer to do it. All right? So that's a little bit of the series. It's designed to be interactive. We want you to bring your authenticity, be your real self. Let's create a brave space where we can explore some of the things that we're afraid to ask. And so the vergers that are in the room can help lead the way around this, and we'll acknowledge them in just a second. Let's go to the next slide. Just a little bit about myself.
I'm not sure I understand.
My wife and I, we started a consulting company after over 10 years in nonprofit management and education leadership. I have a background basically in youth development, so I'm a youth developer at heart. did some work in Oakland, all throughout Oakland and the East Bay, opening up youth centers and health centers and all the things. Our work was always about social justice, being from Oakland that has a little bit of that thing baked into it. And then I think now about 7 years ago, 2016, I joined Allison in On the Verge to found the, what she founded and then I joined, the Family Strengthening Initiative. How many people here are vergers? Let me see who you are. Right on. Okay, so we have some vergers in the room. How many people online are vergers? There are vergers online. All right, hi Jenny. Yeah, so there's folks that have been trained in this model of authentic leadership and non-traditional leadership as strength. And so we love when people bring our authenticity, our experience, and our real selves into spaces. All right. Our pathway for today is simple. On an agenda, we're going to do a melting activity in just a second. We're going to review definitions that have been used here at the Community Collaborative and over on the Verge. And then we're going to go into curiosity, what's possible. This is my, you guys don't know this, but I am doing my second training using my new ARC and DIP model. And so we're going to do the I am, the ARC is ARC, so we're going to acknowledge who am I in the story, that's I am but I am not. Then we're going to reflect on the definitions, and then we're going to get curious. What's possible? And then the tool we're going to dismantle by interrupting non-inclusive behavior. We're going to innovate and practice, and that's the I and the P. And so you guys are experiencing a new model that I am testing. So thank you for being a part of my test. So that's our journey for today. Is there any more setup? Oh, let's talk about agreements. Please be confidential. My definition of confidentiality is not only that what happens here stays here, but it's also if you want to bring something up that someone brought here, especially if it was personal, that you ask their permission before you launch into the discussion, because they may want to share it here and leave it here. All right, so ask their permission. Use I statements. Please don't speak for all folks from Truckee Tahoe or any other group you may belong to. Let's respect each other's experience. Right now, it's people over content and people over organization. All right, so you are representing your organization, but you are a person first, okay? And then we're going to offer grace. In the work of DEI, you're going to make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes, right? And so we offer grace to ourselves and to each other. For example, one of the things as a trainer, I'm training all the time. I'm training tomorrow, I'm training yesterday, is that as we start to unroll sensitivity around being, having multiple gender expressions acknowledged, then sometimes I make mistakes in using pronouns. And I have to acknowledge that and know that I'm going to make those mistakes. It's going to be like a tiny bit embarrassing, but probably not the biggest deal in the world, that if I just acknowledge it, usually I'm offered grace. And so we're going to offer grace today. All right? If you can agree to that, give me a thumbs up. All right. I hope that was everybody. Thumbs up if we can all agree online. Thank you for being on camera if possible. And sometimes it's not always possible. I'm supposed to look this way. Sometimes it's not always possible, and that's totally okay too. We're going to keep finding ways to pull you into the conversation. Do you know if we're able to hear the folks online yet?
Yeah, we should be able to.
Hey, Christina, are you there? We're just
Yeah,
testing
I'm here.
to see if we can hear your voice.
Can you hear me?
There you are. It's good to see you. What'd you have for breakfast?
Oh, I had toast, eggs, and coffee. Oh, and hot chocolate.
Nice. Let me ask this to everyone that's on Zoom. Are there any other agreements we need to make in order for us to practice bravery, to share our experience, and be curious? Any other agreements you want to add? How about here in the room? Any other agreements? All right. Shall we get launched? Let's get launched. This activity is called I Am, but I Am Not. Let's explore in a fun way how stereotypes are placed on us, but may not be really true. So we're going to practice debunking some stereotypes. In front of you are several social identities that we walk through the world, and it may influence how we interact with the world, and it may influence how we're perceived by the world. That can include race, religion, class or socioeconomic status, gender, our education, our level of physicality or physical ability, our mental ability. There are probably 15 more that could be named, but there's a set just to be considered. And for some, these are thought about on a daily basis, right? Some people are considering some form of their identity when they're walking into the movies, when they sit at a fancy restaurant, when they walk through neighborhoods. They're thinking about some element of their social identity that they become most aware of, or it may be intersectionality that they become most aware of. And for others, it doesn't come up as often, right? And that's part of our experience. Let me just stop right here and see, are there any questions about the social identities that we're offering?
Yes. Can we distinguish between race and ethnicity?
Yes, we can. So race is obviously a socially constructed category, usually used white, black, Asian, and sometimes Hispanic, sometimes Latinx, sometimes. And then sometimes my experience as a trainer is people will separate, especially my experience is in brown communities, will separate their ethnicity or call their ethnicity as more of an identity for them, Chicano, Native, Indigenous, as being a lead more than being all-encompassing Latino or all-encompassing Hispanic, for example. I've heard people say, I don't want to be called Latinx, I'm Mexican. And so as a trainer, I've tried to be as inclusive as possible by including race and ethnicity. Would anybody add to that? Because you may have your own experience. I want to offer that. Anyone online want to add to that? Yeah, please. Tell me your name.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Sure. I would say, a lot of people have very strong ethnic identities, such as Jewish or Armenian, that are strong ethnic groups that may not be reflected in race demographics.
Thank you. Were you able to hear that? Thank you. Awesome. All right, here's how the activity will work. So, what are some stereotypes that people place on you or might place on you that are not true for you? You will complete the prompt, I am, and you'll say what your social identity is, relevant, but I am not, and you'll debunk a stereotype. Let's look at the next slide. So you might say, or I might say, I am black, but I am not a sports player, right? I might say I am Christian, but I do not condemn other religions. You might flip it and say, if necessary, you might have to say I am, right? So I am a man and I love Golden Girls. So will you think for a second about what you might want to share? Does anyone want to offer one right off top, another example? Your face lit up. Did you have one? Mm-hmm.
I was thinking I am Jewish, but I'm not Zionist.
Thank you. All right, so why don't you all share at your table? I think we're going to have you all go to online, we're going to have you all go to groups of 4. All right, and we'll talk in a second.
Yeah, so our table is struggling a bit to find something to identify as that felt, you connected to. So I simply shared that I am a man, but don't identify as aggressive as a man is.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
What did you share? Tell me your name.
Kathleen.
Kathleen, what did you share?
I said I am hard of hearing, but I am not old.
Thank you. How about back here? What did you share?
We have very similar elements where we said, I'm a woman, but I'm not.
Let's go. Let me ask you a question. Oh, how about someone online? Can I call on Maria Martin? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Would you share yours?
I said I am a woman, but I am not irrational or irrational.
And how about Jenny? Jenny Roberts, is that right?
You got it. Yeah, I said I am a woman, but I don't wear makeup.
Thank you for sharing that. Now let me ask this question. What happens to our relationships when we make our social identity visible in a comfortable way? What can happen in our relationships? Say? Connection. What happens to our relationships when we share like this in a circle? Yeah, please. Vulnerability. Attunement.
Building of community.
Building of community. Empathy and belonging. How about that? Belonging. So that may even answer our second question. What happens when we make our social identities visible? What else might happen when we make our social identities visible?
Say judgment, good and bad.
Some judgment.
But good judgment.
Good judgment.
Second person.
Clarifying. I heard a lot of clarifying in spaces where there may be assumptions, right? I heard someone say I'm a woman, but I don't choose to have children. Right?
Contextual thinking.
Contextual.
Opens up the context.
Anyone online on Zoom?
Points of connection between people, something you have in common.
Points of connection between people, something you have in common.
Also allows people to confront their stereotypes that they may not have even realized that they had. But when you hear someone like talk about their identity and then say, "But I'm not this," and then you're like, "Oh, I maybe would have assumed that about them, or maybe not." But either way.
Oh, now you're pushing us ahead in the session, but exactly right. So sometimes it just helps us to become aware of things that we may not even understood, may not even thought might be a bias or might be an interpretation or a stereotype that we had not considered before. Let's move forward. So thank you for participating in that. Will you thank your table partners for participating? All right, I want to fly through some definitions just to put us on the same page. And these are definitions that we've used here at the Community Collaborative and then on OTV. So first of all, diversity includes all the ways in which people differ, can you see? And it encompasses all the different characteristics that make one individual or group different from another. The opportunity of diversity is accessed when we understand and value that our work and our contribution is nourished by the multiple perspectives brought about by the inclusion of diverse experiences. Diversity. Equity is defined as the state, quality, or ideal of being just, impartial, and fair. This concept is synonymous with fairness and justice. It implies a dynamic process to bring resources, access, and the removal of barriers to create, support, and sustain social justice. So equity implies actions that open access and takes down barriers. Okay, let's keep it rolling. Inclusion is the notion that any individual or group is and will feel welcome, respected, and valued. This takes place not by being neutral, but by taking an active role and inviting people in rather than pushing them out. Anti-racism, there are many definitions. We chose this one, or I chose this one. Anti-racism is the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies and practices and attitudes so that power is redistributed and shared equitably. And I think we have one more. Oh yeah. And then today we're going to be talking about microaggressions, or it's implied, so I brought a microaggression definition. So brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights or insults. Okay, so we talk about microaggressions a little bit in order to make bias visible. So let me just pause there and see if there's any questions about any of the definitions. Anything you've always wanted to ask a question about? All right, then we're getting ready to get into our practice part. So I want to check with you all, see if you all need a break. I see one break person, and that's great. So let's take a 5 to 7 minute break, go to the bathroom, refill our coffee. I worked with kids for years. All right, let's talk implicit bias is something that has been coming up again and again in our conversations. It takes place in many arenas and serves basically to uphold narrative and stereotypes. And it sits opposed to explicit bias. So explicit bias, I don't know if you guys saw earlier, an example of that is there was this story early last year or mid last year, I don't remember, where at Sesame Street Park in Philadelphia, did you see the story? The characters were like parading through town and hugging all the white kids, but they wouldn't hug or even touch black kids, and they actually like waved black kids off, or they did a slap gesture to the black kids, and one used his little stomach bump to push the black kid down. Sesame Street denied it, then all the camera phone videos came up, and then they came back and they repaired the statement and said we're going to put everybody through bias training. And so that's explicit, okay? Yeah. That's the stuff. You're just like, oh, God, are you serious? Really? And then implicit bias, by contrast, refers to our unconscious attitudes, our unseen, unconscious words, behaviors, preferences that we might not be aware of. It might be our blind spot. Have you considered that everybody has a blind spot? We all have blind spots. All of us in our leadership, there are blind spots. And by virtue of them being blind spots, it means you don't know you have it. As much as we try to understand and know ourselves, we have blind spots. And so let's go down to number 3. It can reveal itself in different ways, such as the words we use to express our feelings, our behavior towards certain groups according to race, gender, sexual orientation, and other groupings. They're deeply embedded in various aspects of our lives, including healthcare, education, the criminal justice system. Many people in this room probably can do a better job at giving the statistics because this is your wheelhouse, whether it be education or healthcare or wherever your organization focuses, the disproportionality of who gets reported to the CPS workers. I know we have some folks down at Ventura working on that and on the verge. And then understanding, here's the thing, understanding implicit bias can help free us from guilt, the judgment that you all talked about. So that as I understand the biases that I carry and that I might carry, then I can start to ask myself, where did this come from? Oh, it was baked in kindergarten. It was baked in from television. Sometimes bias can be against our own group, by the way. Often we have a preference for people who look or come from the same background as us, but sometimes the bias will be against us. And now we see that in the example of the Memphis shootings with the black police officers, right? That's internalized racism, right? I start to believe what I've been told about my own people. But if we start to understand it, then we can free ourselves from that guilt and start to question, where did it come from? I know if we went around the room, we could probably, many of us, share stories of how our families and our parents and our grandparents taught us things that we simply, by the time we grew up, we were like, that made no sense. That made none. Um, and, um, and it gets passed down, but we can interrupt it. So I want to invite you to have a little bit of a table conversation now, and ask yourself a question. Let's look at the next slide. I think this is the question slide. What becomes possible if we can get comfortable in that should be discomfort of interrogating, I want to change the slide so bad right now. And the discomfort of interrogating thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Go, Christina. She's doing it for you.
Thank you. I told you, Christina. Man, if I could just have Christina come.
So.
Blaze Consulting. Okay. I'm kidding. In the discomfort of interrogating our bias, okay? So you're going to have a conversation for about 12 minutes in your group. We have some table facilitators. Will you raise your hand? So if you could just keep the conversation on target. Let's practice possibility thinking. Let's practice asset-based thinking. Let's avoid barriers and deficit thinking in this conversation. And avoid telling long stories or making community announcements right now about here's what our organization does, and we have something coming up on March 12th. But if we could stay kind of focused. And then I'm asking the table facilitators and those who are facilitating online, please invite voices of people of color to speak first. All right, so let's practice some equity in our facilitation. Voices of people of color can speak first, but if you don't want to, I understand. You don't have to. All right? I'll see you in 12 minutes. Talk to my report out people. We're going to go for the heart of the matter. So don't worry about summarizing. Please do not summarize the table's conversation and try to represent all the thoughts of the table. Will you please share from your heart what you're taking from the conversation? Okay, so just bring yourself to it. What are you taking from the conversation? Okay. You said what?
Who's sharing out?
Oh, you didn't choose a reporter outer?
No.
Are we on the spot?
I will choose the reporter outer. Will you report out about what you're taking from the conversation?
What are you taking from your heart?
You speak from the heart. You don't use that table notes. Just from your heart. Don't worry about the, because then you'll just start heady,
This is true.
Okay, let's see if the folks are coming back.
Yeah.
All right, to the folks who are coming back on Zoom, we're going to have a couple of people share. And this is the fashion in which I want you to share. Will you please not summarize what you talked about in breakout rooms? Don't do that. But rather, what are you taking away from the conversation? So let's hear from a couple of people on Zoom, and then we'll hear from a couple of folks in the room. Will someone unmute themselves and share, what are you taking away from this conversation from your heart?
I can go. This is Christina. I think being able to share vulnerably opens the door for community. So, lo que me gustaría compartir es de que para mí en mi grupo de lo que aprendí fue de que si podemos compartir con vulnerabilidad, hay la habilidad de poder comenzar a crear comunidad.
Thank you. Let's hear from somebody else.
I can also share.
Thank you.
Barbara Kane from TTUSD. I think we tend to create these ideas in our head and stories really quickly about people right away, and that being aware that we do that and asking ourselves those questions, it's very important to be able to stop and be able to stop that unconscious bias, because it, as an interpreter, it can have pretty big consequences. So I think that, we tend to, in this world, to create a story in our heads, goes in, files in, and stays there. When we are aware that we're doing it, and we can create some other skills to meet and engage with other people and create the stories based on their experiences, is where we need to be.
Thank you so much for that. And let's look in this room. How about you, Maddie?
I think my biggest takeaway was that when we sit in our discomfort and feel the shame or pain from making our mistakes that we all will make, once we confront that, that can be our agent for change and growth, and open us up to listening and understanding more deeply.
Thank you. I just want to let that sit for a second. When we sit with the discomfort, it may be shame, but then the discomfort and even pain can become an agent of change and growth. Gary, will you share?
Yeah, we kind of said almost the same thing about feeling that shame or guilt, but those biases kind of just exist in all forms of our lives, and it's really hard when you're trying to do the right thing and someone points out that, hey, that's not cool, but inside you're like, but I thought that was the right thing to say, and then that getting pointed out, and you feel kind of that shame and guilt, and then feel like there's maybe even like a resistance to kind of changing because you're like, but I'm trying to do the right thing. I thought that was the right thing, and it feels really uncomfortable. And I think having a safe space to kind of talk about those things and like-minded people that kind of get everything out and help, like, oh, make you realize, hey, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. And also, like, someone says, hey, that wasn't cool. Who are you to tell them how they should feel about it, which is also, I think, speaking for myself, like, it happens to me all the time, and it's hard not to, and I'm, again, not trying to say the wrong thing, but it is hard. And then, yeah, just kind of thinking about it and not being so quick to react, taking time to respond.
Yeah. There's something about what's being shared that makes me think, and there's probably folks who know this model, and I probably shouldn't even mention it, but this idea of learning has in order to have space for learning, there's like a learning zone that's in this sweet spot, and there's like this panic zone that you guys are describing, where I'm so off equilibrium that it's hard for me to learn because I'm just trying to be in fight or flight or something of such sort. And so, like, how can we remind ourselves and calm ourselves in those spaces, or give ourselves a prompt that says, this is a learning opportunity, let's breathe, so that I can hear the feedback that's being offered, hear what the intent is, and also recognize the discomfort of the fellow person, right? Especially when that person's from a marginalized community. And I'll say this more than once, is that in this age of now, we are calling in white folks, that the discomfort that marginalized communities have been feeling are now being experienced more by white people. And that resistance that Gary naturally, but that's been in existence, right? It's just the discomfort has set in a different place. And so now it's being shared a little bit more. And so we might even notice that if we sit in a seat of privilege, like, oh, I'm feeling some discomfort, I'm feeling shame. I'm curious about if this is what it feels like to be in a marginalized, you can't ever feel what it's like to be in a marginalized, but for this moment, I'm feeling something that maybe others have felt, right? And then I won't take myself so seriously in the resistance to it, right? And we can interrogate our resistance from that place. Yep.
Alondra has her hand up.
Talk to me, Alondra.
She's on Zoom.
Great.
Oh, hold on, Alondra, sorry, we can't hear you. Alondra, we can't hear you yet, so 1 minute, we'll turn the volume on in the room. Sorry, little technical difficulty.
Okay, now you're good.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Oh, that I wanted to recognize that there's a language barrier for some of us here in the meeting, and for about 10 minutes or so, they couldn't hear the interpretation in Spanish, and it was uncomfortable. And the discomfort to, like speak up and interrupt the conversations that are happening in person, and being mindful that, there was like a decision to just stay quiet instead of speaking up and saying we can't hear, to not interrupt those conversations because of the minority and being Latino. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you for sharing that. And first of all, my apologies that happened. Are we all good now, Alondra?
Yeah.
Your thumbs up. And I want to acknowledge whatever it took from you to even share that right now. And I appreciate it. I really do. So let me know, and please do interrupt us if there's any other technical difficulties that's making the content inaccessible. Let me just make sure I'm clear. Was it for the last? Has it been out since the breakout rooms? Have you all missed the conversation that just happened? Alondra?
Yeah, it was before the breakout room.
Before the breakout rooms.
Yeah.
So you didn't get the information about implicit bias.
No, I think there was some confusion with that when I jumped in to facilitate my group, but I think we figured it out. And
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. For now, can we put that slide up while we go to the next part, just so people can visually kind of take in some of the information? What I'm going to try to do is a little bit of repair is to put up the implicit bias 5-point slides, just so folks, if you want to take a picture of it, that's another way.
In Spanish, of course, right?
What did you say?
We're putting it up in Spanish because they're the ones
I'm just
that read it.
sitting there, sorry.
Great. Thank you, Jenny. Right on. See, this is how you do community. This is real. This is the real deal.
¿Sí pueden ver los slides en español?
She asked if we are going to put it on Spanish.
Sí.
Oh, they are in Spanish. So to view in Spanish, you will need to click on the more options next to the green bar on top and select ver diapositivas en español.
Ludim, Rocío, Maribel. ¿Sí tienen los slides en español, Pati? Sí, okay.
Sí, sí.
And can you hear me? I guess there's something in the chat that Sandra can't hear. Sandra, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear? Great.
Yeah.
We're good.
We're good? Okay. We sat quiet for 3 minutes, warning when the content will continue, and the group sat for 2 minutes. Quiet.
Yes.
form and what is the content. We'll talk about vital behavior. All right. So there's this great book that I love called Influencer. I don't remember all. There's several authors, so I don't know if someone wants to pull it up on Amazon. We can share it later. But it is about the science and the art of transformation in communities and organizations. I think it's beautiful. And one of the things that they named is vital behavior. What are the behaviors that will move the needle, that will make a difference in culture, that will cause cultural change? So there's a lot of behaviors we can do to shift the tenor of our organizational culture. But what are the vital behaviors? You can kind of make a little bit of a connection to tipping point behaviors, right? And so this one vital behavior that we're moving towards interrupting bias and non-inclusive language is the ability to call out or call in oneself and others when we are taking actions, creating programs, and communicating in ways that counter inclusion and equity. So how do we create, as Maddie and Gary were talking, how do we create a culture where when that happens, it's just like, well, that's just what we do here. So it's not really that big a deal, right? If someone says, you know what, wait, is it Erica? Erica says something, and then I go back and I just re-explain everything Erica just said just fine, right? And so then Nancy comes forward, she's like, Franklin, I think we understood it when Erica said it. And instead of going into my shame spiral and then I'm quiet for the rest of the meeting, it's just what we do here at Truckee Town. It's just what we do at Community Collaborative. I'm like, oh, you're right. Yep, my apologies. And then we just keep it moving, in that case. Because it's just like, yeah, I am inclined naturally, as a man, I've been taught it's okay to go ahead and re-explain so that for the people who didn't understand, the intelligent person that just spoke. This might be this might be relevant here. I see a lot of freaking smiles. All right, so yeah, how do we make that a vital behavior? That's what we expect people to do. And then, when there is something that's running counter to inclusion, that the behavior that Alondra lifted up so beautifully, how do we intensify or accelerate that process, knowing that it runs counter to our current culture? So first of all, just let's recognize it runs counter to our current culture. Okay? So an example I like to give about that is I am naturally predisposed, not naturally, but I'm socially predisposed that I will not disagree with Peter. If Peter offers an explanation, I am first going to question. If I have a different opinion or thought or expertise, then I'm going to question like hell before I ever speak to Peter's point. Because I've had 80% white teachers, I'm inclined to think that the white man is the expert. Okay? So then to actually speak up takes extra energy from me. Right? Could you imagine what it takes for me to even talk about white men standing up here right now? With white men in the room? All right, let's talk about this vital behavior. Let's go.
Well, I want to answer your question because one thing I saw you do, I've never seen in a facilitation before.
What's that?
How do we counter the behaviors that lead to lack of inclusion? You paused. You stopped time. And usually whenever we have a meeting, it's always really full and the time is going, we got to stay on track, and we got to stay on time. And you didn't do that. Let's wait. Right? You normalized, let's wait until we're all here. You normalize that. And that is very brave. that a lot of people, I don't see it happening as a norm. So I just want to name that, and then you offer to repair. So I just want to name what I saw when you asked the question, what are some of the vital behaviors we can do? You are comfortable waiting and doing nothing. Possibly the most powerful moment we'll see in the presentation. You are comfortable doing nothing. That's super brave. So that's what I saw. Thank you for that. Because when I felt you do that, I gained a lot of trust in you, in this process, and we're really doing it. We're really going to live it. We're not just going to talk about it. We're doing it. Cool. I love waiting for that. It's real.
It was a real moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Alondra. All right, so let's get into this behavior. It's time to practice. All right? Y'all ready to practice now? I've been talking a long time. Let's get some practice going. So, calling in versus calling out. What's up? Okay. Calling in versus calling out. So when we call in, that just means it's like, let me tell you, you can Google this if you want to read pages and pages and pages of people's thoughts about calling in versus calling out, okay? I did not make up this concept. But summarize it, it's just the opportunity to initiate a dialogue when there is a microaggression or a behavior or a practice that runs counter to diversity and inclusion, where we go from a place of curiosity and learning. What can we learn from this moment? And it implies that there will be some accountability, but it's accountability with empathy, right? And it's built on curiosity. And usually done in small groups or one-on-one, not to blast somebody. Now, sometimes calling out is necessary, right? Because there's imminent harm being perpetrated, right? And so then we got to stop the process right there before more harm is done. And so sometimes you do have to do the public call out. But for the most part, you want to call in, and that means that we're creating a space where there's a little bit less panic and a little bit more learning. So then when we're calling in, it's best done with where there's already a relationship, or at least agreed upon about what's trying to happen in the space, right? So like, what's the work? What's the agenda? What's our mission statement? You know, that kind of stuff. What are our organizational values? So I may not know you very well, but at least we have these values in common work-wise. So that's best. Now, also, it's very hard to call people in who don't want to change. So sometimes that could be weaponized or counter-weaponized. I don't even know the right term, but sometimes you're trying to practice empathy and calling in, and this person has no intention of learning. And so therefore, we move to calling out. Okay. Now, because the calling in method doesn't work. It's kind of like restorative justice. If the person doesn't want to examine their harm, then the restoration problem doesn't actually work because you won't own. And then I also put here just like a little statement to my my folks who hold privilege in many different ways. Sexual orientation, race, class, education level. You have a privilege called, and especially if you're white, you have this thing called social capital and capital. And this author says that the privilege of that is that you can spend it and it just gets refilled. So one of the privileges of being white and sticking your neck out there to say this behavior can't continue or this behavior has to be addressed is like, 1 minute later or 5 weeks later or a year later, what might have been lost in terms of reputation or social capital, it gets restored, right? And so that's part of having that awareness of the allyship and what the privilege is and what you can do with that in the service of equity, okay? So any questions about this? Any questions online? All right, let's get into the practice. All right, so you are going to practice, we're going to the theater. So we are going to do some role plays where you're going to practice calling someone in, all right? And we're going to do these in little small groups and have fun with it and play with it, so feel free to laugh. But let's first see a scenario so you can picture yourself. Then I'm going to give the directions. Then you will see the scenario again, okay? So an organizational leader, the organization is planning its annual fundraiser dinner. An organizational leader assigns white middle managers to present the accomplishments from the year at the fundraiser and suggests that frontline staff collect coats and serve food on the buffet line. He offers, I don't want to overwhelm our frontline staff with responsibilities to present. The frontline staff happens to be women of color. Okay? If you think I'm calling out your organization, I am not. This happens all over the place in nonprofit land. All over the place. I was with an organization that is very forward on this DEI. Went to their annual dinner, and they mistakenly missed one point. They had all the white women presenting up front, and they asked the black men to park cars. It was because they were men, and they're just parking cars. There was no harm intended. It just happened to be that the valets were all their black men, right? And when it was pointed out, they were like, oh, it just happened. It's baked in, you all. It's baked in. All right? So here's the pathway of how you're going to practice. Let's go to the next one. So why don't you think about in that scenario, what bias or non-inclusive language is showing up in the scenario. On the table are envelopes. Each one of you gets an envelope, and it has prompting cards. I have some extra up here too. There are prompting cards in there, so they're just prompts. And what you're going to do, and on Zoom we're going to drop a link to the prompts, and you're going to shop for one prompt to start your call-in process with this organizational leader and share it with the members of your small group. Does that make sense? Okay, so go ahead and grab the envelope so you can start to see an example. Elizabeth, will you read us one example? What's the color scheme? Okay, Christina, can you... So wait, folks, hold, time out. Let me see this real quick, Fred.
Alondra.
Okay, so the white cards are calling out cards. Don't use these for this activity. Use the yellow cards, which are the calling in cards. You'll notice the white cards are a little bit more like... All right, so use the yellow cards. Okay?
Yo no veo ninguna tarjeta.
You're going to practice speaking to the organizational leader about this situation, but I want you to literally practice it with your small group, in small groups. So maybe you guys split into 2 threes. Yeah. And then you guys do your split, and maybe you all split 4 and 4. Okay, our group is coming back online. Hi, Zoom. Hello. All right, let me hear 2 people on Zoom speak to the organizational leader. Someone who has not spoken yet. Look how many people are on camera. Let's go. Let's go. Okay, someone who has not spoken, will you use one of the prompts and speak to the organizational leader? Should I call on someone?
I can go.
I was coming to you, Natalie.
So on the first flashcard, our group I thought of like re-asking the question to make sure that we're understanding what the person that's in front of us saying, or rephrasing it to make sure that that we're understanding correctly what they're trying to say and they're understanding correctly what we're trying to say.
Well, Natalie, would you please actually say it to me, the organizational leader? Use one of the property cards. Let people hear the voice of you using the card.
I don't have the card in front of me.
Oh, can we put it on screen?
Yeah.
Sorry. That's my bad.
I'm sorry, hold on. I have to actually pull it up.
Okay, I found it. I'm curious, what was your intention when you said that? That was the flashcard we were focusing on.
Nice. Thank you. Let's hear from one other person.
Can I also ask that we make space for folks specifically to ask it in Spanish? ¿Puedo pedir que le pregunta o que participe una persona que habla en español, por favor?
Christina, do we need the flashcards up in Espanol?
Sí, por favor. I just posted it. Lo acabo de poner en el chat.
Gracias. Great. Do people have what they need to participate? Or I would love to invite someone to share in Espanol. What does the silence mean?
Go ahead.
Okay, that's. Oh, someone's speaking?
No, there's a hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Maribel or Rocío or Unum, you'll have to take yourself off mute.
¿Pueden, Ludim, Rocío, Maribel, quién iba a hablar?
Sí, bueno, estamos un poco inseguras en compartir porque no sabemos si entendimos bien la dinámica que teníamos que hacer. Y nosotros hablamos sobre lo que iban a hacer con elegir ciertas personas para cierto puesto en el evento. Y entonces hablábamos sobre el impacto que pueden tener las decisiones o los comentarios de la gente a la hora de elegir a las personas para ciertos puestos y no creen capaces de repente a ciertas personas para cubrir otra línea.
Was that the scenario?
Alondra, would you be able to translate that for us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So Ludim was sharing that that we weren't sure. Well, they weren't sure if we understood the activity correct, but so that's what the reason for the silence. But we did talk about the first flashcard and trying to understand. We had a conversation about what the organization was asking, well, the person was asking from the organization to speak from the manager's perspective versus the first line folks. But then we actually didn't really get a chance to finish talking about it. we were, yeah.
Nice. Thank you for that. And thank you for sharing. Sweet. Okay. All right. So then I wanted to actually cut to a little scene. And so I wanted to invite our players here to show you how this conversation might go with the organizational leader. So Audrey and Grant?
Yeah.
All right. So
And Alex, he's gonna.
can you all stand for the camera? For camera 3?
Where's yours? Is it this one? All right, yeah.
All right, I see the camera adjusting to you. I think you're over there.
Yeah.
No what? Oh no! Oh no! Your camera's here.
Your camera's here.
On camera.
But you're
Okay.
all backwards.
So how did you determine to put the frontline staff on the buffet waiting line?
Well, it's really hard to hear. If you guys can speak a little louder for the Zoom people.
We have mics up here on the front table, Franklin. If
Oh,
you
okay.
the
There you go.
table, that would be
All right, will you come to the
Thank you.
Thank you.
into the well? Into the well.
Oh boy.
Audrey's brave. Talk loud. Good job.
Guilty as charged. So how did you determine to put the frontline staff at the buffet serving?
Typically, they're not in a position that they, are in front of the public speaking a lot, and I put the people that I thought would be most comfortable and natural in that role.
Huh.
How might someone else see this differently?
Well, I think it's pretty standard and normal in most organizations, but now that you're bringing it up, perhaps I could see, based on who is in those roles, that it could be seen as, discriminatory.
What was that last word?
Discriminatory.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. What would have to change for this to not happen with this organization again in the future?
Well, I think that if they're comfortable in those other roles, that they could come and speak up and ask if they could have that position.
Uh-huh. But the other people that you put up there didn't have to ask, right? So why do they have to ask?
Now that you bring that up, I can see where you're coming from, and I think that maybe perhaps we need to have more conversations about that.
Well, thank you for hearing that and for being willing to see that these things actually happened at this organization, because not everybody does, so I appreciate that.
Thank you for coming.
All right, let's give it up for community collaborative players.
We kind of had a similar scenario, and then we unpacked a part of that.
Yeah.
Which, as leaders, that comfort aspect.
Hmm.
So, I work with 2 of my staff members. Oh, can you hear me?
They said a little bit. Why don't you come on up too? Yeah. These microphones are better, right? Where I'm standing? Yeah, they're giving me like yes.
This
Yeah.
is putting on me on the discomfort for the comfort. So
Yeah.
I was talking about how, as a leader, I have staff members who I'm trying to empower to become leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of unpacked how there could be some internal implicit bias. This is great for me, actually, because I have 2 specific, one Chinese American, one Mexican American, who both I want to empower, but often they find more comfort in this labor role. One of the Chinese American who I work with all the time is proud of his history of railroad workers who worked, proud of his family of hard workers. They're hard labor workers. Even today was like, no, I need to go work in the gear room, I'm gonna work. And so it's kind of like me looking at, maybe there's some implicit bias within him creating this, I am a worker. That's where I belong. And it also made me think about how you're standing up here saying things that are uncomfortable for you. So as a leader, not just saying who's comfortable, but helping people find that implicit bias within them and helping them find that discomfort in order to grow. So in order to help him find growth beyond, maybe? No?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, no? I don't know.
I know I'm shaking my head no, but I really do mean yes.
I don't know. This is something we were trying to unpack. So, because I'm looking at these 2 people who I think are leaders, but maybe are stepping down because
Look,
they don't
there's
feel...
hands like popping everywhere.
You
Yeah.
have to say you have somebody on Zoom.
Come
so
on.
help us unpack this.
Yeah.
Oh,
And we
I
have
was
to
just gonna
unpack
say,
it in 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
sorry, real quick. I was just gonna say, and at the same time, you talked about listening to, other groups. And so there's that to balance with that. You want to empower and you want to say, okay, well, maybe that is, if that's what he wants, if that's, so both.
Exactly. So that's what we have been doing, is listening and letting them step not down, but not be in the front. So how do we look at, is that an internal implicit bias within them, wondering whether or not they belong in the limelight? Again, it's like that uncomfortable conversation we were just talking about in that last work piece.
Yep.
Which is what in them says, no, I don't want to stand up in front. I want to do the work on the side.
Yeah.
What is happening in me or in the whole system to say, no, you belong in the front.
Yep.
But also as a leader to help them be comfortable stepping into the front.
Yep.
Not just saying, go up there and be in the front because it's better for equity and inclusion. But how do we create the pathway to say, no, it's better for you as a person.
Yep.
Because you belong in the front, you are empowered and you have the right things to say. And when you're comfortable, it's there for you.
Yep.
And I can support you in that comfort, and I can support you, so I guess as a leader, how do we unpack creating that pathway towards comfort through listening, through helping unpack internally and externally, or anyone else's ideas?
Yeah, let me say this.
Yeah.
Let me say about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So there's so much there that, we could spend another hour, or for the vergers that are in a room, we spent 5 months unpacking that question, right? And this is where we get to complexify this dynamic, right? Because what we're learning, specific tailored here in this community, is that we're asking people of color and we're inviting people of color to take increased areas of leadership, okay? And we have to, as we open up those spaces and as white people get out of the way, we have to then ask ourselves questions like, have we built the capacity of people of color to take that space? Are we setting BIPOC folks up by just putting them in without preparation? But who gets to decide that? Hopefully those communities together. Because if it's a white person saying this person's not ready yet, and then then it's more of the same, right? So we have to then say, oh, this is interesting. Let me call my Chinese American friend who might understand this dynamic a little bit better and get some insight on what the experience might be. And let me invite, if it's a Latinx person. So now we're inviting more people to the party because we may not have the information we need to understand how to get in there and on that dynamic. And what was presented was so typical around take it from me, right? Take it from us. And at the same time, that is not part of our culture. Taking things from white people is not part of our culture. Okay? So to complete that thought, then we have to ask ourselves and this is part of this series, like what's built into our culture, what practices, what structures, what ways of being are built and baked into our organizational culture that reinforce this dynamic. Because it looks like, folks are happy to be doing this. And I can say a lot that will, about that. But that's gone on for a long time. They're happy being the workers. Has been a long story. Okay, let's do 1 and 2 and then we gotta get out of here.
I just have a quick question on, and I'm not saying that's what's happening in the scenario that you presented.
Yeah,
and
talk to me.
May I have permission to speak about the scenario that you just presented? Is that cool? I'm just wondering too about, and I'm not saying that you're Caucasian. I'm not saying any of that. But the white leaders who want to rise up the people of color, and they're happy working, and the white leaders want to empower them, at what point do they become the saviors? Like that's
We're going to
the whole
explore that.
savior
I can't
conversation.
unpack that right now. So, but
Okay.
that's the right question.
Yeah.
But we're going to explore that. That's actually on the agenda of a future session.
Stay tuned for the
Yes, stay
exciting
tuned for that. That's a very, we explored that question. Yes. So, yes.
Thank you.
It's a fine line.
Yeah.
It's a fine line.
And
And I think the first thing that I did say just 2 minutes ago is if you are white, get some people of color into your personal network so you can have these conversations, right? If somewhere in the 10 closest people that help you think about how to run this organization, especially when you don't trust your own thinking, if you don't have people of color to give you some perspective in a loving way, this is the work if we want to move anti-racism forward. You're going to be our final thought.
I think something that, I mean, yes, the white savior, I was going to bring that up, but also something that isn't talked about is accept no. Like, even if the system is set up, even if everything is ready, why does someone have to be a leader? If someone doesn't want to be, that's okay too.
That's right.
And it's okay with, again, like that listening, and like just because we think someone should have a position doesn't mean they want to. So I think also accepting no as an answer.
Yeah.
Patience. Long game.
All right. Can you put up the new slides out? Didn't ask your permission to put in.
And I don't have those ones finished.
I'm so sorry. First of all, let me apologize, and I hope Sandra, I hope you'll help me interpret. This morning I had something occur to me that, and so if you can help me interpret, I actually had a situation at work of some implicit bias show up very explicitly, and I dealt with it, and I want to share with you how I thought the conversation went well. So I want to share with you what happened. The scenario is that my organization put on a virtual conference. We staged a virtual conference, and we hired a professional technology company to actually do all the stuff so that it looked better than Zoom. And so we had a producer. We had an award-winning producer who was great, loving. He was our vibe, and he was white. And so in our work on the day of the event, while the event was happening, my son came into the room and removed the light because my wife determined that did not look good on camera. And so he moved it. That guy said something of the equivalent to, I was like, that's my son over there. He's like, oh, I hope that's who it was, because otherwise there's some thug moving some stuff out your room right now. And I was just like, and the event was going on, so I was just like, ooh. So I had to address it later. Here's what I said. Hi, Joe. His name's been changed to protect his identity. This is a private message. I so appreciate all the things you did to make our company shine yesterday. I do need to share one piece of feedback. Yesterday when we were backstage, I let you know that my son was tech support. I heard you acknowledge that he was tech support and then jokingly say, otherwise you were concerned that there was some thug stealing furniture out of my office. You also mentioned his hoodie as an identifying characteristic of a thug. Referring to any black youth in a hoodie as a thug is not okay to express as a joke to any person, especially to me as an African American. For me, personally, equating William to a thug who might be stealing brought images of Trayvon Martin. This guy was on Zoom in Florida saying this. My son was also in the room, and he may have heard it. Jake, I'm not sure what the intention was, and I can't sit with the feeling privately and not bring you into the thinking. I'm open to talking if you want, and I look forward to continued camaraderie and good work in the world. Here's his response. You have my utmost apologies for that reference, Franklin. I'm so very sorry to have caused even the slightest offense in that or in any regard. Of course the statement was made in jest, but in retrospect, exceptionally poor taste on my end. Please extend my apologies to William and Gingy as well, or if it would be more appropriate, I would be more than willing to do so myself. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, as this education can only help further our partnership and doing good together. My response.
Can we slow down for the interpretation?
Yes, thank you. Go back a slide. Thank you.
I think she's probably on this slide, yeah.
She's on what?
On this slide.
Stop right there. Okay. my response, thanks, Joe, for your consideration and kind words. This is exactly why I appreciate who you are. This is over for me, and I look forward to our next steps. Deep respect, Franklin. I believe this is what's possible if we could just normalize it. This right here. Just let's normalize it. And continue to do great work. We're not canceling nobody who's trying to do the right thing, right? And so I really just want to end here and thank you for welcoming me into your beautiful community. And I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Allison.
So with that, I just wanted to, again, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Franklin. Thank you, Sandra. We really appreciate all your work. And thank you, Christina, and Phyllis, and Dana. And I've been out of the office for a little bit, so everyone who pulled together to make this happen today. And Franklin, I just really want to acknowledge that I recognize that as a Black man, what it takes to teach a group of folks about anti-racism and the toll that takes. So thank you so much for doing the good work. And then we normally do announcements at the end of our meetings, but because of time today, if you have any information or program updates or anything else you would like to share with the collaborative, please send it to Christina, and she can include it in the bulletin. And then this is the first of a series of 3 trainings with Franklin. So the next one will be March 14th. It's not the first Tuesday in March when we normally have these meetings. It's been moved to the 2nd because of a couple schedule conflicts. And then we're not meeting with Franklin in April because it's T2SD spring break, and maybe their spring break, but we'll be back in May. And at this point, the next 2 are on virtual, but maybe we can talk about that as well. Yeah, we'll see. I know you're. Anyways, okay, so thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
Extra envelope if you want to take some out.